So this is a an extract from a GCSE English language paper on explorations in creative reading and writing. But what it does do, this, is goes through a brilliant technique that you need when you actually do creative writing, which is the zoom in technique. So we're going to look at the zoom in technique. And this extract is from the opening of a novel by Daphne du Maurier, one of my favourite writers. She's based in Cornwall, basically, and she lived in Cornwall and loved Cornwall. She also wrote a brilliant book called Rebecca about a man who kills his wife, actually. But anyway, it's a sort of detective horror story, Rebecca. Anyway, so although written in 1936, it is set in the past, and this section, a coach and horses with its passengers, is making its way through Cornwall to Jamaica Inn. So this is actually the first page of the novel, and we get this wonderful technique called the zoom in technique. Jamaica Inn. It was a cold grey day in late November. Full stop. The weather had changed overnight, when a backing wind brought a granite sky and a mizzling rain with it. And although it was now only a little after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the pallor of a winter evening seemed to have closed upon the hills, cloaking them in mist. It would be dark by 4. The air was clammy cold, and for all the tightly closed windows, it penetrated the interior of the coach. So you can see that this is starting right out the whole, starting at the sky, the weather, and some sort of, we'll find out that it's actually pathetic fallacy, which means that basically the weather is reflecting the mood of the main character in the novel, who we zoom into in a minute. So you've got this lovely, miserable description that we can actually feel like we're there. It's very grey and dull. It's going to be dark by 4, which isn't good, is it? So it's late November, yeah. So you can imagine being on a moor in late November on a moor, cantering across in a coach with the rain dripping in. That's where we are. Okay, so we'll carry on reading. I've got one of my students, aged 10, reading it for me now. I hope you enjoy it. He's great. Very good. Pallor means you're white or pale, pallor, Pallor, pallor. So the pallor of a winter evening. So it's a very pale winter evening, basically. Do you know what mizzling means?
Does it mean like, I might
Mizzling means sort of very, very fine rain. It's a sort you get in Cornwall. It's always there, basically, mizzling. And it's very, very Cornish rain. It's mizzling. It's sort of everywhere. Sort of, it's coming off the sea, basically, and so it's very, very wet and grim. Okay, carry on.
The pallor of the winter evening seemed to have closed upon the hills, cloaking them in mist. It would be dark by 4. The air was clammy cold, and for all the tightly closed windows, it penetrated the interior of the coach. The leather seats felt damp to the hands, and there must have been a small crack in the roof, because now and again little drops of rain fell softly, smoking the leather and leaving a dark blue stain like a splodge of ink. The wind came in gusts at times, shaking the coach as it's travelling around the bend of a road, and it exposed places on the high ground with such a force that the whole body of the coach trembled and swayed, rocking between the high wheels like a drunken man. What are you doing? My mum's just come in.
Okay, carry on.
A drunken man. The driver, muffled in a great coat to his ears, bent almost double in his seat in a faint endeavour. What does that mean?
Endeavour. It means a faint endeavour is an attempt. Yeah, carry on.
To gain shelter from his own shoulders, which the dispirited horse prodded sullenly What does that mean?
Sullenly means in a bad mood, sort of sadly and in a bad mood, sullenly. It's what teenagers often sullen. They've sort of got long faces and not very happy. Carry on.
To his command to broken by the wind and the rain, to feel the whip that now and again cracked above their heads, while it swung between the numb fingers of the driver. The wheels of the coach creaked and groaned as they sank into the ruts on the road. What's that?
What, ruts?
Yeah.
Ruts are sort of dents where the wheels have been. So there's always ruts in mud. Mud, when it's mud and you drive your bike, you can have very deep ruts. So that's what's happened. It's
like a pothole.
Yeah, but it's long. It's where you've driven through it, basically. So it's the ruts are where you drive, and it makes this big long dent in the road. Because this is written in the it's set in the past when people had coach and horses, basically. Although it was written in 1936, it's set deep in the past. Daphne du Maurier lived in Cornwall and loved Cornwall, so she writes beautifully about Cornwall. You can see that this is beautifully written, can't you? Do you want yeah, and it's beautifully written, so that's why we're looking at it. So, do you want to carry on reading?
Yes. And sometimes they flung up the soft spattered mud against the windows, where it mingled with the constant driving rain, and whatever view there might have been on the countryside was hopelessly obscured. The few passengers huddled together for warmth, exclaiming in unison when the coach sank into a heavier rut than usual, and one old fellow who had kept constant complaint ever since he had joined the coach at Tutor rose from his seat in a fury, and fumbling with his window sash. With the window sash. What's a window sash?
A window sash is where, sash windows, which we have in old houses, that basically they slide up and down. That's what a window sash does. So basically it slides up and down. They have it on trains as well, those windows that slide up and down. And in very old houses they have a window, sash windows they're called. Okay.
I'm confused what a sash window is.
No, like in the flats where Steve lives.
Oh, that. Oh, like that.
Those sliding.
Oh, those things.
Yes.
Yeah, slash windows. Okay, so they got them on coaches, about 100 to 150 years ago. Carry on then. I'm just going to get you to read to the end.
Let the window down with a crash, bringing a shower of rain upon himself, and his petulant.
And his fellow passengers.
It's petulant.
Yeah, hang on. He thrust his head out and shouted up to the driver, cursing him in a high, petulant voice for a rogue and a murderer. So a petulant means bad-tempered and moany, basically. That they would all be dead before they reached Bodmin if he persisted in driving at breakneck speed. They had no breath left in their bodies as it was, and he, for one, would never travel by coach again. Whether the driver heard him or not was uncertain. It seemed more likely that the stream of reproaches was carried away in the wind. For the old fellow, after waiting a moment, put up the window again, having thoroughly chilled the interior of the coach, and settling himself once more in his corner, wrapped his blanket around his knees and muttered in his beard. His nearest neighbour, a jovial, means jolly, red-faced woman in a blue coat, sighed heavily in sympathy, and with a wink to anyone who might be looking and a jerk of her head towards the old man, she remarked for at least the 20th time that it was the dirtiest night she'd ever remembered, and that she had known some. That it was a proper old weather and no mistaking it for summer this time. And burrowing into the depths of her large basket, she brought out a huge great hunk of cake and plunged into it with her strong white teeth. So she's a very jolly woman who's, coping with it pretty well, having a good old chat about it, and she's got large chunks of cake. They're in a really horrible wet coach, travelling across a muddy moor, basically. Mary Yellen sat in the opposite corner, where the trickle of rain oozed through the crack in the roof. Sometimes a cold drip of moisture fell upon her shoulder, which she brushed away with impatient fingers. She sat with her chin cupped in her hands, her eyes fixed on the window, splashed with mud. and rain, hoping with a sort of desperate interest that some ray of light would break the heavy blanket of sky. But a momentary trace of that lost blue heaven that had mantled means covered in a sort of gentle way. Helford yesterday shined for an instant as a forerunner of good fortune. But a momentary trace of that lost blue heaven that had mantled Helford yesterday shined for an instant as a forerunner of fortune. So what we can see about this is it's a beautiful description, isn't it? And yeah, the description goes from the cold grey November, the weather, then it goes down to the coach, then it goes down to the wheels of the coach, then it goes to the horses, then it actually goes to the passengers, it goes inside, like a camera, like a zooming camera, isn't it? Like in a film. So it's good writing, okay? And that's where the way to do good writing is to start really at a distance and then zoom in. So then you've got the driver, then you've got the jovial red-faced woman in the blue coat who's quite colourful and chatty. And then finally we zoom in on the main character, who is actually the main character of the book, Mary Yellen. And we zoom in on her. This is the first page of a novel called Jamaica Inn. And so basically the first page starts in the pathetic fallacy of the weather. The weather's really bad, and then it zooms in. It's a very brilliant technique that great writers use, and you too can use it yourself. So if I go back to my Zoom technique piece, it's perfect for all your creative writing. And this is the diagram that we've got to look at, where you can see it, descriptive writing, which is exactly what that Jamaica Inn is doing. It starts off with a wide angle shot, the sky, the shape, the colour, does exactly that, doesn't it? Then it goes to mid shot, the people, the size, the smell, the sound, the touch. That's, you know, the fat, jovial lady. I don't know why I think she's fat, but that one. And that bad-tempered old man. And then it zooms in to dear old Mary Yellen, who's been, you know, really miserable sitting there. Okay, so it's called the zoom-in shot. And it's a really helpful way of writing. So for homework, I'd like you to do zoom in from your crow. So start with the very distant shot, and then just zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. You can do the house, you can do the garden, you can do the background, and then you zoom in on the crow. Okay. Will you do that for me? So you can do two. You write me another poem about your fox, and then zoom in on the crow. How would you like that?
Okay.
Excellent. Okay.